Hello my dear students. Today we are going to start a new chapter, that is chapter number 7, the changing cultural tradition. Students, this is the chapter which is connected to the previous chapter little bit. Not connected, it is the continuation of the previous chapter. Because in the previous chapter, that is the 3 orders, we studied about the European society, which was there during the Dark Age period, that is the medieval period, which is considered to be the medieval period for the European history. And in this period, in this video, we will discuss the time period just after that of the Dark Age, that is the Renaissance period. See student, the changing tradition from 14th to the 17th century. In the previous video, we discussed the chapter after the fall of the Roman Empire, that is around after 4th century, 5th century. And mainly we discuss in that from 9th century up to the 14th century. And I told you regarding that was considered to be the Dark Age in the medieval European history. Why? Because at that time there was the domination of the church and the feudal lord, mainly the feudal lords in the European society. And the people were no longer go for the rationality or the reason. They just have a blind faith on the religion or what is said by the feudal lords. Okay, see students, here from 5th to that of the 14th century, the time period in the European history is said to be the medieval age. Okay, when we distribute this time period from 15th to 14th century, from 5th to 9th century, the time period is said to be the Dark Age. Okay, and after Dark Age, 9th to 11th century, as I told you, it was the time period when the changes came, the environmental changes came in the European society. From a very cold weather, the climate now become a little bit hotter. Because of that, the agricultural changes came in the European society. So this time period was said to be the early medieval age. And now from 11 to 14 is said to be the late medieval age in the European history. And during this time period from 11 to 14th century, as you have studied in the previous chapter, that it was the time period when the trade flourished. Because of the agricultural advancement, the surplus production started, and that surplus production was exported, and that give rise to the trade. And because of the trade, now the money-based economy started. So from this period said to be the late medieval age. And for 14th century, as you have studied, there was a crisis in the European society which is known by the name of the 14th century crisis. Okay, all this you have studied. So student, Dark Age, early medieval age and the late medieval age. Okay, up to 14. But now in this chapter, we study from 14th to 17th century. And this time period, 14th to 17th century, is said to be the Renaissance period. What is today? Renaissance period in the European history. What is Renaissance? Renaissance means new age. Or the age of the meaning of Renaissance is the rebirth, a new age. The age where the reasons means the society now have a scientific kind of a approach, a logical mind. People started thinking with a logical mind. Okay, so this time is said to be the Renaissance period, and after this started the modern age of the European society. Okay, 15th century onwards started the modern age. So the time period which we are studying now is the middle one time period which connect the middle age to the modern age. Okay, from middle age, when we move to the modern age of the European society, then we have to pass through the Renaissance period. And after this Renaissance period, because of this Renaissance period, the period of enlightenment, the modernity came in the European society. Okay, now I hope you understood what we are going to discuss in the chapter. During medieval age, church had a control over man's mind. Medieval age की क्या characteristic है? The characteristic is that during medieval age, the church was dominant and the church had a control over the mind of the people. as there was a belief of the church that the earth, it was the belief said by the church that there was an earth-centric theory. What is earth-centric theory? As we consider now in our solar system, the sun is at the center and all other things revolve around the sun. But because the earth-centric belief said that the earth is at the center of the universe and all other things revolve around it. So this theory was given by the church, which was proven to be false during the time period of the Renaissance. Okay, so the things which church led the people to believe, जो चीज़ें चर्च ने लोगों को बताई थी और जो बिलीफ सिस्टम बना था वो जो है इस टाइम में आकर जो है वो खत्म होने लगा, started to be broken. So the domination of the church also fall during the Renaissance period. But before the Renaissance period, that is Middle Age, it was characterized by the control of the church. Apart from that, all the Greek and Roman learning was blotted out. Means Greek and Roman learning which was there during the time period of the Roman Empire. It was said to be the one of the glorious age of the European history. Because at that time there was a Greek culture or the Roman culture which was so much advanced. But during this Middle Age, all the things which were the advancement of the Greek and the Roman culture, the advanced culture which was there before was blotted out, was erased from the mind of the people, and the blind kind of the faith was established in the mind of the people. So these two are the characteristic of the Middle Age. But after this, now from 14th to 17th century come up the Renaissance period. Renaissance period means the New Age. Regarding this we will discuss in detail later on. For now you have to understand that Renaissance means rebirth, new age, the age of logic, the age of reason. Now people started thinking with the rationality, with the reasons. Okay. And after this Renaissance period connect the Middle Age to the modern age. Renaissance time, the term Renaissance was used. As I told you, the time period is from 14th to 17th century. Okay, but for this time period, the term Renaissance was first time used in the 19th century. This term was first time used during the 19th century. Okay, and it was firstly used by one of the Swiss scholar. Swiss means the scholar belonged to the Switzerland. In Switzerland, there was a university named University of Basel. So there was a scholar there in University of Basel of Switzerland named Jacob Burckhardt. So Jacob Burckhardt was the first man who used the term Renaissance for this time period. Okay. Who was Jacob Burckhardt? Jacob Burckhardt was the student of one famous man named Leopold von Ranke. Student Ranke was a very famous or the early historians who tell us about how the history to be studied. In the higher studies during the masters or the PhD time, तो PhD में जब हमें ये पढ़ाया जाता है कि हिस्ट्री को किस तरह पढ़ना है और रिसर्च कैसे करनी है, तो उसमें हमें रैंके को ज़रूर पढ़ाया जाता है. He told us the approach of the history. So Ranke was the great scholar and the historian. So Burckhardt was the student of Ranke. Okay, and Ranke taught to his student or taught that according to Ranke, प्राइमरी कंसर्न ऑफ द हिस्टोरियन, रैंकी के अकॉर्डिंग क्या था कि कोई भी हिस्टोरियन है उसकी प्राइमरी कंसर्न क्या होनी चाहिए, वॉज टू राइट अबाउट स्टेट एंड द पॉलिटिक्स यूजिंग ऑफिशियल पेपर एंड द डॉक्यूमेंट. मीन्स according to Ranke, the history should be studied by the perspective of the politics only. Means there should be political history only. ठीक है, रैंके के टाइम पीरियड तक जो रैंके ने स्टडी की थी वो हिस्ट्री को जो है सिर्फ पॉलिटिकल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से स्टडी किया था, बाय द ऑफिशियल डॉक्यूमेंट्स, बाय द कोर्ट डॉक्यूमेंट्स, रिकॉर्ड्स, इन सब के थ्रू जो है पॉलिटिकल हिस्ट्री, कोर्ट हिस्ट्री को ही पढ़ा था. और अकॉर्डिंग टू हिम हिस्ट्री कैन बी स्टडीड इन दिस पर्सपेक्टिव. But the student of Ranke, that was Burckhardt, was dissatisfied with this limited definition of the history. Therefore, Burckhardt was dissatisfied with this limited goal. And according to Burckhardt, what was the thinking of Burckhardt? History must more concerned with culture as with the politics. Burckhardt के according क्या था कि as the history should be studied with the perspective of politics, we must have to consider other things also, like that of the culture. Culture also played a very important role. When we study the history, we must also study the culture of during that historical time period. So the definition of the Burckhardt, or the view of the Burckhardt of seeing the history, was very much different from that of his teacher, that was Ranke. And Burckhardt, in the year 1860s, he wrote his book named The Civilization of Renaissance in Italy. What was the name of the book? The Civilization of Renaissance in Italy. And in this book, he paid his attention towards the students, humanity subjects you all are having. So what is humanity? This thing you also study in this. This thing arose from here, from the Renaissance period. Renaissance period tell us about the humanities. What is humanity? What is humanism? And also turned our attention towards the literature, architecture, painting. Means history should be studied by the perspective of the architecture. When we study the history, we should also consider the architecture, the literature of the time, the painting. All these things must also be considered, and all these things are included in the culture. These comprise together form the culture of that particular time period. So humanistic culture in Italian town, with one more important thing, this Renaissance time period, from in Europe, from which place the concept or the thing of the Renaissance, the new age began. So it was Italy. The name of the place was Italy. Italy was they were the towns of the Roman time period, which later on flourished as the main trading center. As I told you, Roman Empire के टाइम में कुछ towns थे जो बाद में after the fall of the Roman Empire they also decayed. But after the 11th century, when the trade flourished, then these towns became the important port centers, trading centers during this time period, and after that they again regained their life and started to be flourishing. और ये टाइम जो इटली के ये कुछ शहर थे, लाइक दैट ऑफ द फ्लोरेंस, वेनिस, जिनोआ, ये कुछ शहर थे where the influence of the church as well as that of the you can feudal lords was very less. So this was one of the reasons why the age of the Renaissance started from these cities, these towns of the Italy. तो वहीं से स्टार्ट होता है. अगर आपसे पूछा जाता है कि रिनाइसा जो है कि उसकी बिगनिंग कहाँ से होती है, तो वो होती है इटली से. ओके, टाइम पीरियड क्या है? 14 to 17 century. और द फर्स्ट पर्सन who used the term Renaissance was the Jacob Burckhardt, and he was the student of Ranke. Okay, and he first time used the term during the 19th century, and the book written by Burckhardt was the Civilization of the Renaissance in Italy. Okay student, so this is just the background. Now student, now we move to the first topic, that is the revival of the Italian city. As I told you, the Italian cities were there from where the Renaissance time period began. That was the place where it started to be flourishing. So we here in this topic studied that how the revival in this Italian city began. As I told you, Roman Empire, after when the Roman Empire fall after the 4th century, then as I told you in the third chapter, Roman Empire, it broke into two parts, Western Europe and the Eastern Europe. Okay, Western part of the Roman Empire was soon break into many small parts, while the Eastern part of the Roman Empire was in the eastern part, the Byzantine Empire was established. Okay, Byzantine Empire established its control, and after that the Roman Turks established their control over there. Okay, while in the Western Europe, बेटा ये वेस्टर्न यूरोप है, जहाँ से ऊपर जो है ये सारे वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज है, यूरोपियन कंट्रीज है, इटली है, ये सब जो है वेस्टर्न यूरोप है. तो हम जो पढ़ेंगे वो मेन ये वाला पढ़ रहे हैं, रोमन एम्पायर जो वेस्टर्न पार्ट जो है उसके बारे में. ओके, और यही टाइम पीरियड था. हियर स्टूडेंट, वंस अगेन आई एम रिमाइंडिंग, 14 to 17th सेंचुरी वी आर स्टडिंग. ठीक है, रोमन एम्पायर का ब्रेक होता है आफ्टर द 4th century. ब्रेक हो गया वेस्टर्न एंड ईस्टर्न. ओके, आफ्टर द 4th century में 5th century अराउंड. और इसी के बाद में टाइम पीरियड आता है व्हेन द राइज ऑफ द इस्लाम आल्सो टुक प्लेस. ऐसा यू हैव स्टडीड 510 में जो है प्रॉफिट मोहम्मद बॉर्न, एंड आफ्टर दैट द राइज ऑफ द इस्लाम आल्सो स्टार्टेड. सो ऑल दीज थिंग इम्पैक्ट the revival of the Italian city. Why? Because the rise of the Islam and the establishment of the Roman Empire, this Ottoman Turks, all these led to the flourishing of the trade, because now the western part of the Roman Empire had a trade relation with these, and these trade relation, these flourishing relation led to the flourishing of the revival of this Italian city. Okay, so student, western part, the influence, as you have studied this dark age, the time period that the influence of the Pope reduced and the influence of the feudal lords increased. The feudalism flourished in this. And after the fall of the Roman Empire, as I told you, many Italian towns ruined. And because they ruined, and the Western Europe was spread or broke into many small parts, therefore there was no unified government in the western part, which broke out from the Roman Empire. And because of this, the development in the Western Europe between 9 to 14 helped the revival of the Italian culture. 9th to 14th century. This one, 9 to 14th century. That is the medieval age time period. Dark age, after this medieval age, number one dark age, then come up medieval age, then come up the Renaissance period, and then the modern age. Okay. So during the medieval age, there was the revival of these new cities of the Italy. With the expansion of the trade between the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic countries, as I told you, and with the expansion of these trade, the ports of these Italian coasts revived. ये जो इटालियन सिटीज थी, ये जो थे यहाँ पर पोर्ट, इनके जो शहर थे ये समंदर के किनारे थे, हैविंग द पोर्ट टाउन, दे वर सेड टू बी द पोर्ट टाउन, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ द फ्लोरिशिंग ऑफ द ट्रेड, दीज टाउन्स ऑल्सो फ्लोरिश्ड. दे once again regained their life. 12th century, during the 12th century, Mongols also had the trade relation with other part, with the Western European country, as well as with the China. And for this they have to cross the Silk Route, और उन्हें Western Europe तक आना था. ठीक है, all these things led to the use of this port town. Therefore the Italian towns, as I told you, which were the towns? Florence, Venice. ये पहले से ही ये जो शहर थे, they were the Republican city. क्यों थे ये रिपब्लिकन? क्योंकि जैसे मैंने आपको बताया था, यहाँ पर फ्यूडल लॉर्ड्स का इन्फ्लुएंस कम था शुरू से ही. वो इसलिए भी कम था बिकॉज in these cities from the early time, from the ancient time, there was a concept of the citizenship concept was there. There was the idea of the citizenship. The decisions related to the city was taken in the common meeting by calling all the people. तो वहाँ पर ऐसा कुछ नहीं था कि एक डोमिनेंट क्लास है फ्यूडल लॉर्ड्स की और वही सब डिसाइड कर रही है. ओके, और बिकॉज ये जो शहर थे, यहाँ ये पोर्ट टाउन थे और ये ट्रेड की वजह से ही फ्लोरिश हुए थे. बिकॉज ऑफ दिस यहाँ पर जो लोग रहते थे वो मेनली मर्चेंट क्लास रहते थे. ऑल वर इक्वल इन वेल्थ approximately. That's why the decisions related to the town or the city were taken collectively. So there was the idea of the citizenship among them, and these things, this basic build-up of the city was the main reason why the Renaissance began in these cities. So this is all, beta. You have studied the background as well as the revival of the Italian city. The main cities were the Florence, Venice, Genoa. All these were the main cities of the Italy, from where it started to be flourishing. बेटा आगे हम पढ़ेंगे कि रिनाइसा और डिटेल में क्या होता है, ह्यूमैनिटीज क्या होता है. अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट वन इम्पॉर्टेंट सिटी फ्लोरेंस के बारे में पढ़ेंगे. मेनली इटली का जो ये शहर था फ्लोरेंस, यहीं से शुरू होता है. यहाँ पर एक यूनिवर्सिटी थी जहाँ से जो है, जहाँ के जो स्कॉलर्स थे, स्टूडेंट्स थे, वहाँ से ये ह्यूमैनिटीज का कंसेप्ट स्टार्ट होता है. थैंक यू.